Hello, and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, Commander of the Armies of the North, General of the Felix Legions, loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Wow.
And this is Commodus.
That is so harsh. So harsh. So
All week, man. All week.
His real name is Ben. My name is Jim. Welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. This week, it was my movie adventure because I couldn't handle the detritus that was getting thrown my way by my co-host, and I just needed a little bit of good cinema. So look, what did we do? We went back and we watched Ridley Scott's Gladiator from the year 2000. Now, Ben has already kindly given us the full and heroic name of the protagonist of this film, Maximus Decimus Meridius, clearly selected for its awesome sounding awesomeness.
Did you like my Russell Crowe impression?
I did. You know, it's interesting. It's the theater neutral accent of, you know, Hollywood, whereby, you know, is he Australian? Is he English? Like, you know, and that's not to say it's a bad accent. It's a very deliberate choice, and it makes him hard to place in the movie. And I think actually, weirdly, his accent and line delivery is one of the big, you know, pluses of the film. And there's a lot of pluses. So before we get too deep, why don't I walk us through the film and let you all know what it was about, in case you haven't seen it for the last 24 years.
Because it's an obscure film. It's one of Ridley's lesser known.
So look, very quickly, let's break down the plot. Gladiator takes place in 180 AD, and it is a film set in the Roman Empire. So Maximus Decimus Meridius, played by Russell Crowe, is the leading general in the Roman army. He is very close with the ruling Roman emperor, Marcus Aurelius, played by
his
Richard
real
Harris.
name, Dumbledore.
Played by first Dumbledore. But unfortunately, while they're out on campaign, Emperor Marcus Aurelius is fairly close to the end of his life. So unfortunately,
like original Dumbledore,
while Marcus Aurelius would select Maximus as his preferred candidate to continue on in his absence after he dies, unfortunately, Emperor Marcus Aurelius has a son called Commodus, who is played by Joaquin Phoenix, who is just a wonderful villainous piece of work, whose sole goal is rule of the Roman Empire after his father passes away. So add to the mix Commodus's sister, played by played by Connie Nelson. And look, she is also there as a previous flame or love interest of our hero Maximus. And look, we'll get into how Commodus feels about his sister. In any world, it's not okay.
There are Greek tragedies written about this.
That's right. So this is our setup for our plot. Now, look, when Commodus realizes that Maximus is actually the preferred candidate to carry on his father's rule, Commodus does what Commodus does and murders his father, and then attempts to murder Maximus, which sends him on the run. Unfortunately, Commodus wants to do this job thoroughly, and he also sends assassins to Maximus's home to kill his wife and young son. Maximus then, in his grief, is taken on by functionally slavers and forced to fight in provincial gladiatorial combat. But of course, he's really good at it because he's actually a Roman general. So Meanwhile, Commodus is attempting to take control of Rome and win over the people of the Roman city, as well as the Senate, who are his rivals and who really know that perhaps he was not the preferred candidate for emperor. Commodus's plan involves restarting the Gladiator games in the Colosseum. And of course, as our lead hero Maximus is now a gladiator in the provinces, he finds himself back in Rome in the Colosseum and with the ability to do something about Commodus's corrupt and illegitimate rule of the city. So Maximus makes himself known to Commodus in the scene that Ben referred to very, very at the start of our podcast, a very, very famous scene, and continues to fight in the gladiatorial games in the Colosseum in order to win favor with the mob that is Rome. Connie Nelson is and I'm saying that because honestly, Ben, I cannot remember her character name. You know,
You know what?
so.
I can't either. And there's legitimate reasons for that we can get into. Because her role in this movie, yeah.
Yeah, but look, so in the background, she is attempting to protect her son from both Commodus, his conniving uncle, and also attempting to work with Maximus to try and remove Commodus from power. Long story short, Maximus wins a variety of games in the Colosseum and ends up face to face in the arena with Commodus himself before actually succeeding in battle only to then die, leaving Connie Nelson with the job of restoring the Senate to rightful power in Rome. And that, friends, is the story of Gladiator. What did you think, Ben?
Gladiator! That was a good run through. I liked it. Plot description, tick. All right. Quick facts. Released 2000. Directed by Ridley Scott of Alien, Blade Runner, The Martian, and soon to be released Gladiator 2 fame. Starring Russell Crowe, Joaquin Phoenix, Connie Nielsen, Oliver Reed, Derek Jacobi. Ah, man, I hate this name.
Oh,
Dimon Honso?
I say Jaimin, but I'm not sure. So
I think look, Durs there. His best friend in the Gladiator ring is the guy from Africa.
I love
the one true
that
Dumbledore, Richard Harris, and Spencer Treat Clark.
I love that we've researched, we've thoroughly worked out the pronunciations, the character names, and we are ready to deliver for you.
Professional. And Spencer Treat Clark, who is not listed on the breakdown of top billed actor or actresses in this film, but I thought should be in it because he's the kid. Do you know what he's from? It took me ages to figure it out.
No, I felt like he was familiar though, so can you enlighten me?
The son from Unbreakable.
There you go. Yep, I get it.
He's in tons of stuff, actually, but that's what I remembered him from. Budget of $103 million, and domestically it returned $465.4 million. Look, movie did good, and for a variety of reasons. Hans Zimmer soundtrack as well.
Yeah, if we're talking about the soundtrack, one thing that I love is that only a few years after this, Zimmer was involved in the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack as well. And this film came first, and it's pretty clear he has thieved from himself.
Shares some DNA for sure.
There are several musical themes in this movie that are very, very similar to Pirates of the Caribbean in a way that is almost distracting if you're really familiar with that series. But what other trivia do you have for us,
I don't have trivia. I do have plenty of thoughts on this film, though, because it has been a while since I've seen it. And, like, I remember the big beats of this film quite clearly. I don't remember, and I felt it this time, parts of this film dragging.
Oh,
I remember
this
film, and I pinpointed where it is, and I pinpointed why it is for me. And I actually don't think this is a technical problem. I think it's a character problem. I think, in a strange way, we cut back to Commodus too soon. I would have liked to have followed Maximus a little bit longer and left Commodus in the background as a mystery, almost until they got back to Rome and then see him again. But he cuts in his story cuts in much sooner than that. So you've almost got parallel stories for a little bit of like Commodus, his nephew, and
Lucilla. I
Lucilla.
worked it out.
Lucilla. They almost run kind of a parallel story for a little while, and then they kind of come back together. I would have much rather leave the Commodus story a little bit until we're back in Rome, where they're in the same location. It is a real nitpicky thing, and probably because I have watched this movie a few times, but I did get bored in those first cutaways because I'm like, I know he's horrible. We saw him murder his dad. We saw him like do all these horrible things. We saw him, kill a wife and a son. We don't need to see him still be creepy and bad until we get back to Rome. Like we get it.
Yeah, see, I feel, and look, you may disagree with this, but my thing with that is this was really a global audience's introduction to Joaquin Phoenix. And he was a very, fresh, new talent at the time. Now,
that might be the other thing, Joaquin Phoenix fatigue.
Well, the thing is, like what I was going to say was in the intervening years, between Gladiator and now, we've seen, Joaquin Phoenix play all of these roles, some of them quite similar to Commodus. Like, even if you look at his unhinged, Joker performance, for instance, so we've seen him do this before, but I think we need to remember as well at the time.
This was the first.
We hadn't seen him much at all. And, it's sort of no surprise to me that they wanted to feature him heavily because when they saw what he was doing, it was a dynamic, engaging, interesting performance, so
that might
and of
be
course,
it, right?
And the other thing is, like, he's also one of those actors who he was clearly a raw talent here, but in the intervening years, he's pushed himself further and further and further, particularly with this kind of role. So we've seen him go much further than this, a lot of times now. So I wonder if that could be part of what you're...
It's like I'm looking at Proto versus the complete package, and I'm like, I'm not as engaged because I'm expecting something else, maybe. Back to the start of this film. This film kicks off with a banger. Yeah. This film kicks off better than almost any film I can think of. The battle at the start of this film is awesome. Like, legit awesome.
And it really is an amazing sequence. And it's not something where you sort of point to, shots that are particularly showy or over the top, or like, it's not like the battle, you look at it and go, whoa, there's crazy choreography there. It just feels visceral, real, it feels authentic now whether it is or not, and we can talk about authenticity in the film, but it feels authentic, which is really the major goal of cinema, is that you feel like this is probably how that went down, So the other thing that is interesting to me is this was the period in time, very soon on the heels of Saving Private Ryan, whereby, playing with a film's shutter speed, which is a particular setting that controls both light and motion blur within a film camera, was... they played with it a lot in Saving Private Ryan, and this is almost an extension of that. Yeah. You saw that sort of smearing slow-mo effect in the battle sequences. Now, importantly, while it did come into fashion, if you like, for a while, with films like this, and then it sort of faded away again, I think the important thing is it's not overused. It's used every now and again, and it doesn't detract from the finished film. Instead, it just adds, more of a sense of that visceral, interesting kind of look to the battle sequences to make them feel a bit more chaotic. So, but look, the Ridley Scott is someone who absolutely has attention to detail with his period pieces. He cares very much about the production design, and the way things look, the way things are shot, the way the costumes are sitting on the characters, you know, what the armor looks like, how it moves, like, and how he's going to photograph it. And I felt like the combination of the wooded setting, you know, the armaments, the characters going into battle, and all of that attention to detail with the visual flair of Ridley Scott just does make that opening sequence incredible. And it's not the only sequence that is,
No.
you know, very, very involving from an action perspective in this movie, you know, which is one of the things that
it also
led to it being such a success.
It also sets the theme of the movie of, it's not maybe historically accurate, but it's of theme. So, like, for example, Romans didn't have static, like, catapults and ballistas in the field. They just didn't. It was built into fortifications of towns and cities, but it doesn't have. But it looks really cool to light stuff on fire and throw it and impale a bunch of dudes on one arrow. And those things definitely existed of the time, and they were Roman. They just weren't used in that fashion. The other thing is, Romans fought in a very particular way. And that's actually not represented in this film until you get into the Colosseum. The whole phalanx system of interlocking shields, moving forward, overwhelming your enemy with precision, accuracy, and coordination. Whereas this battle quickly devolves into one-on-one fights across battlefields, which just didn't happen at the time. It's not how wars were fought. It's not how wars were won in Rome. But again, they're using the equipment. They've got the correct spears. They're doing the same light horse tactics that the Romans did, and all those sort of things. So it's of the theme, and these things were done in places around Rome. They just probably weren't done all in the same place. The other thing that I want to point out that has started around this area is them. It's not. I don't know if it's a mistake. It's definitely a choice. I don't know if it's the right choice. They interplay Latin and Italian, which are different languages. And they treat them as if they're speaking to each other. Like, and it's because the movie's in English, but they have these kind of like little words, like Proximo, one of the characters, right? Would actually be called Proximus. Proximo is Italian. Proximus is Latin. There's like these little weird tweaks throughout the film, all that sort of stuff. But again, like, such a fantastic film. And one of my favorite scenes is the attempted execution. And he's kind of like his stopping of that, and he's like the whole Praetorian, and you're just like, ooh, that guy's not long for this world.
The frost. Sometimes it makes the blade stick.
Yeah. But I'll bring it up a few times in this movie. I'm a history nerd. I love history, Roman history especially. I've read books, I've listened to podcasts, I studied the subject myself. And I think this movie gets things not wrong. It changes things to make a better movie. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I will point them out.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I feel like Ridley Scott as director, you know, and this was really the first historical epic that he made, but it's not the last historical epic that he's made. He's really, you know, done a lot of these now. And he kind of almost famously, to the point where, you know, people in the know who followed his career, it's almost a little bit of a joke, you know, that he says, "Oh, it's all accurate. It's all completely accurate. It's completely accurate." Like, you know, and we've heard him say that so many times that, you know, and it's quite clear that, well, it's not accurate, but as you said, you know, he does. It's the right vibe, you know, and it feels accurate, you know, which ultimately, as I was sort of saying, is the big goal of the movie. This is also, you know, a big sort of silent, hidden visual effects movie. You know, this was a movie that really, the way that they were shooting it, once we get into the Colosseum, you know, this was a film that, you know, would not have been possible to shoot in this way pre-visual effects era, and you can sort of see it was almost refreshing a little bit to sort of watch, and look how strategically they're using their visual effects and planning, conserving, if you like, how many vis effects shots they're actually using. Whereas, of course, modern movies is just like, it's everywhere. It's in every single scene. It's in every single
you're
shot.
unable to divorce the film from them now.
Yeah.
Whereas,
but whereas here in Gladiator, what we're seeing is we're seeing really well thought out, partial, large set builds that then hand off to a CG set extension. And look, I will say that the visual effects, of Rome as a city and the Colosseum in particular, don't always pass muster in the same way visually, because but they are still very good,
it
and
only
they're very
really
well
hurts when
thought
there's
out.
no action, or it's doing like a long shot of the city. They're the ones that really hit, right? But when there's action, or when they're looking up out of the Colosseum into crowds and stuff like that, or that you're seeing partials of streets that obviously aren't there, they're kind of extended shots. Like, that's where it really works. It's adding character to the city and the scenes rather than, all that sort of stuff.
And because of the planning of it, and the sort of commitment to compositing plus some miniature work, it never detracts from the movie. And this movie, was known, if you like, as a really big hallmark and milestone in visual effects. So it's not like we're saying the visual effects are bad. They're not. It actually won the Oscar for best visual effects. So it also won the Oscar for best actor with Russell Crowe. Like, how do you feel about Russell Crowe in this movie? And have you heard the stories, the Hollywood legends, if you like, about how he may or may not have conducted himself?
It's not a best actor performance. It's a performance that fits this film, and it serves this character. But, like, the emotional pathos in this movie is his connection and loss of family. Really? Right? Like, that's the emotional crux of this film. It's the pivot in Commodus's relationship too, which we haven't even gotten to, is his family and his complications with his father and his sister and the threatening of his nephew and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, like, the emotional moments in this movie are a lot of quiet Russell thinking about his family, holding a wooden figure, and then a bunch of really commanding yell speak. And it's awesome. It's not an Oscar. What was he up against? Do you know?
I'm not sure, actually. So, but it's interesting because this is obviously one of those movies, the Hollywood engine, where we had multiple screenwriters, as most of them do, and one of them, sort of went on record and, for better or worse, sort of said that Russell Crowe claimed his script was garbage, and that he was that Russell Crowe was the greatest actor in the world and can make even garbage sound good. And it's sort of like, obviously that's not a nice thing to say about somebody.
This was definitely Russell's awkward period, shall we call it? But he was throwing phones and.
But it's funny because Crowe was asked about this quote because it's quite a famous quote. Obviously, it sort of got around.
Sorry, I just looked up who he beat for best actor.
Right, we'll get to that in a second. So, but like, it's Crowe was asked about that exact quote in later years and said, "Did you say that? About the about this movie?" Which also, by the way, was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. Right. So, and Russell Crowe went, "You know what? That sounds like something I probably would have said at that point in time. But truth be told, I do not remember saying it. And yeah, it was kind of not a great thing to have said if I did actually say that." Do you know what I mean?
Not cool, Russell. Russell.
Which I kind of thought, well, that's good of him. He's saying, look, I don't remember saying it, but honestly, probably, yeah. Like that sounds like me in the year 2000 with where I was at. You know what I mean? Like,
so he beat Javier Bardem, Before the Night Falls, Tom Hanks, Castaway, Ed Harris, Pollock, and Jeffrey Rush, Quills. Tom Hanks' Castaway is better than him in this movie.
Look, it's interesting because we could have a whole separate podcast on what should and shouldn't win Academy Awards, but
Oh, can we not? We're not politically savvy enough for this anymore.
Look, I think it's a good performance. I'm glad that he
It's a
got
good
recognized
performance.
for it, and I think it is actually, I would say, and maybe you disagree, I think it's beyond a good performance because of the stakes, I suppose, of what it is he's doing here, like with this role. Like it's physical, it's emotional, like it really does sort of cover the spectrum of leading man performances. Like, not perhaps taking the actor to as many places as many times in the story as something like Castaway, so I can totally get that, but look, I am pleased at least that that we had the nomination there. So look, I will say as well, a couple of other things this time around. Well, I've watched this movie a lot. And not really recently, because it's interesting. The more historical epics that Ridley Scott has done, I used to watch just Gladiator a lot, and then over the years, as he produced more, as he had a go at Kingdom of Heaven, as he then had a go at Robin Hood, which yes is folklore, but his has a historical take. So I started sort of moving those into that sort of rotation as well. But I used to watch this movie quite frequently. So and there's always been this one bit of trivia, which is apparently in the chariot scene in the Colosseum, there is a pneumatic gas canister in the back of one of the chariots, because obviously for stunt work, they set these things off and it causes your car or truck or chariot, in this case, to flip on itself. And I knew that this was the case, and I have never been able to spot the canister. And going into that sequence, I was literally like, is this going to be me watching this chariot sequence again? Because I've done this before, and not being able to focus on the scene because I'm looking for the supposed, gas canister in the back of a chariot. So I actually paused the movie. I went online.
Yeah.
I found a screenshot and a timestamp of it, skipped forward in the sequence to that moment, watched it, and I'm like, there it is. It is true. I can see it. I've done that now. Walked the sequence back to the start and just enjoyed it, properly the second time.
That chariot fight is awesome. Like, it's spectacular. We talk about choreograph, like action in the first battle. It's not like known for it. This is a lot of choreographed action that is happening, and it happens at such a speed. I mean, one of the most brutal deaths too, actually. The person gets cut in half.
Yeah, that's a big one. That sticks with you, that one. Like,
but yeah, it was brilliant. And look, I'm going to use this opportunity to bring up another historical inaccuracy. Although people did die fighting in gladiator battles, the vast majority were not to the death gladiator bouts. Because even though gladiators were slaves and scum, they made money. And they can't make money when they're dead. So most of them were like first blood, first injury, or even to a surrender, so that gladiator could then fight again. So very rarely was there a fight to the death planned. It happened. They were fighting people with swords and stuff, and chariots, and there were lions and all that sort of stuff. It definitely wasn't OSHA certified. But yeah, death wasn't usually the goal of a bout. And on that note, the thumbs up, thumbs down thing wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
just wasn't. It's traced back to an artwork, like almost, I don't know if it's Renaissance or a piece of art where there is a crowd giving the thumbs down to a gladiator, and that's literally where it came from. There's no historical evidence for like a put him to death or let him live, thumbs up, thumbs down. But yeah.
But a great visual moment for the film, and a nice motif that they can return to show the will of the mob,
influencing itself on Commodus.
Looking at those, I think one of the movie's real strengths is the variety in the gladiatorial bouts. So if we go back to there's a about four, if I've got that right, gladiatorial bouts in the movie, maybe five, but one of them's quite
Yeah.
short. But because
Yeah.
he does two in the provinces,
Yeah.
when he's before he gets to the Colosseum. And the first one that he does there is just a very brutal fight,
It's
So,
like, welcome to the jungle.
exactly. And then the second one, out in the provinces, is really to show his dominance and superiority, and the fact that he's been doing this for a while. And it's a shorter battle because it's mostly about the famous "Are you not
Yeah.
entertained?" Which is again a fantastic line that's iconic from this movie. And then when you hit the Colosseum, they're all different. We start with the chariot battle, which has its own unique flavor with all different obstacles in the way. Then, of course, there's the battle with the retired,
Tired.
undefeated Gladiator who comes back, and then we've got the tigers, who are heavily involved, and then there's the Commodus battle, and I'm just like, these are all different. They're all, got something new and thrilling to them, which I think was really smart, in the way that they executed those bouts. But should we talk a little bit about Joaquin and his, his
Yeah. Look,
relationship with
so
his sibling?
anyone who knows Roman history knows there was in the modern day, we have tabloids, we have YouTube channels, all this sort of stuff who make up specific stories based on maybe a slight truth to scandalize and sell copies, or to lower a political opponent, or things like that. Ancient Rome and Greece invented this. And I actually think this is a little bit where this has been dug from. There were a lot of Roman emperors or prominent figures who, after they passed away, rumors would be like, oh, well, there's a new political leader, so we got to put down this one. He definitely had a thing for his sister, and it was real gross and whatever, and there was no physical proof of that. And they've kind of built this into Commodus's character. They've built this kind of sister Oedipal complex into this character that we view in real life. The real Commodus has no historical backing for this, but it serves to create what this movie needs, which is just a despicable coward of a character. And it works in this aspect. Could they have done it other ways? Sure, but they were definitely leaning into that Roman hearsay, gossipy nature of the mob, kind of after the fact, talking about a Roman emperor they hated, and putting it into that character, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's also the character of Commodus. I think from a modern perspective, it's actually weirdly refreshing to watch with a modern lens, to just be like, he is evil.
He has no motivation other than
he is 100% evil. We're not really trying to humanize him. We're not trying to see things from his perspective. The movie's just like, imagine something despicable. Commodus has probably done that thing, like in his life. Like, so, because these days, obviously, the trend is now to, humanize our villains, see things from their perspective, make everything
give them a recognizable motivation. Yeah.
And I kind of liked looking back on this, going, yeah, it's like, yep, this guy needs to go. I'm done with him. There is nothing redeeming about him.
So real Commodus didn't have the sister thing, but he was also an awful human being. He did, historically accurate, he did enter the gladiator arena and fight people. Historically accurate, he did stab them, or they were crippled beforehand.
Yeah.
And he won all of the fights, and then made the city of Rome pay him a winner's purse. Like, the dude was the worst. He killed so many sparring partners because fight to the death, that's what the heroes of legend did. That was his big thing, right? He wanted to be a hero of legend. He renamed Rome in his own name. Wild. And this is even juxtaposed because just before him, his father was Aurelius, was the last of what they called the five good emperors. Like there was this 100 years of prosperity, and then Commodus came in and ruined it all. And they really get that vibe down in this movie in a really short amount of time. He is the suck.
Yeah, he's the worst. But and obviously the things that he's saying and doing are awful. But the way Joaquin Phoenix plays it is just a delight to view because you never know what choice he's about to make next. There's one that I particularly love when he watched one of the deaths in the Gladiator arena, and it cuts to Commodus, and he just sticks out his tongue in this grotesque kind of like almost like sort of snake like, and his eyes bulge, and I'm just like, what a choice, what a bold over the top choice that just shows how sick this guy is, which as an audience when you watch you're just like it's delightful to watch an actor just kind of go for it, like, and then to have it in the hands of a director like Ridley Scott, who is going to work with that performance and put all of it up there on the screen. So yeah, there's something fun about watching a really awful villain do their thing on screen, and then of course see that villain have their ultimate comeuppance at the end of the film. So
I think what makes it even better is in that scene where he realizes he's going to lose, and he looks to his Praetorian Guard, and he's like, "Sheathe your blades." Nope.
Yep.
He dug this grave. We're going to let it play out because we can.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of really nice moment. In real life, Commodus was choked to death by his wrestling coach who took a bribe. He wasn't liked, and they're like, "Hey man, if we give you money, will you kill Commodus?" And he did while he was having a bath.
Oh, shall we talk a little bit? Obviously, we got to bring this in for a landing soon, but we would be remiss not to talk about, Oliver Reed in this movie, because obviously, I'm surprised, Ben. You usually bring the trivia, but you must know the tale of Oliver Reed in this film, do you?
I do not.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so
I concentrate on the history this time.
So Oliver Reed plays Proximo, okay?
Yes.
So, and this is his last film role because he actually passed away during production of this film. So his sequences were not finished at the time, and this is one of the sort of first examples of basically using visual effects trickery in order to finish someone's performance. Now, it was a very early days, rudimentary, subtle version of that, but functionally, Oliver Reed, passed away during the making of this film, and his scenes weren't done. And in particular, the part that was not finished was what became his death scene. So that whole sequence where he talks to he's got the keys, he walks across the yard, he talks to Russell Crowe at the gate, and then he goes back up to his chambers and the guards come in and kill him. He didn't shoot any of that. That was a combination of a body double for wide shots, which they did in near total darkness, and very well composited, earlier shots of him in unused takes from the movie, with cutting back to behind his head when they needed to dub a line in with a voice alike, and kind of making it work. Now, obviously, they did this on a really large scale with Carrie Fisher in Rise of Skywalker. But this was functionally, I guess, one of the first instances where we were really leaning on a combination of things, one of which is visual effects to, paint out the original background that the actor was shot on, because we need him to be in a different location, change the color timing of the scene so that we can, if it was shot in the day originally, we're going to bring it to night, and we're going to make it all work. And that they did a really good job of repurposing
Yeah.
that footage and, you know,
You
cobbling that
can't tell
together.
unless you know. Like, I wouldn't have picked it.
Yeah, it's if you watch the sequence again, you'll be able to see
Yeah.
the little telltale signs, particularly because you know, some of those visual effects cues that we notice from 25 years ago that maybe are sort of visual effect tells. But look, very well done, and his
Yeah.
performance is great, and it's you know, very sad, of course, that he wasn't able to actually complete his work in this movie. So look, ultimately,
Awesome
Ben,
fact.
I really like Gladiator, and it's interesting. Like, its sort of spiritual sequel, which is, you know, to say not a real sequel, but a spiritual sequel, is really Kingdom of Heaven, with Orlando Bloom. And it was interesting when I first saw Kingdom of Heaven, I didn't like it at all.
I was gonna say
You know,
I don't remember really digging it.
yeah, and then it was one of those movies where sort of two things happened. I think I realized that I kept comparing it to Gladiator, you know, and I was just like, I couldn't, you know, actually
Yeah.
look at it on its own terms. And then the second thing they did was one of those things which, you know, you'll just love, Ben. Ridley Scott released a roadshow format extended edition, which, you know, actually, the roadshow format was something they did in the 1950s, where they actually had an intermission
Yeah.
in the film, and it was in that sort of tradition of Ten Commandments, Ben Hur kind of stuff, you know. And that was actually Ridley Scott's initial vision for the film. And when I saw it in the roadshow format, I was like, oh, I think I get it now, you know. And it's just it plays a lot better in that extended version.
Should we respect a film if it takes an extended edition or a re-release to make it good?
Well, it's like watching a different movie. That's the thing. Like, you know, it's
Is it?
kind of
Is it really? Is it a different movie? Or is
it
it the
is.
same movie with some extras?
Well, it is a different movie because you think of it in the sense that, like, if your first introduction to the movie and your only introduction to the movie is its extended format, you know, because the other thing is, you think about intended format as well. You know, if it was actually intended to be that long and there were external pressures that caused it to be cut down, you know, then that actually detracts from the film overall. But again, we could do a separate podcast about just this, Ben.
I
Just
think I'm
this.
gonna start some sort of movement that's like, you get one go, movie. And I don't care why you got that version of the movie out. That's your go. I watch too
Okay.
much Justice League.
No
But
one told you to do that.
but overall, again, yeah, it is. I think it's one of those movies that will stand the test of time like the classic epics did. I
Yeah.
think that's what this has done better than it could have even dreamed of, is it created a new modern epic.
And, and that was a huge goal as well.
Yeah.
Like, this was a swords and sandals epic. And those films that I was referencing, Ten
Yeah.
Commandments, Ben-Hur, you know, looking at Spartacus, right? This movie was
It's an ode
designed.
to it.
It's
Yeah.
yes, designed to bring that back, to say, hey, this was a great type of film. Let's go again. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And of course, to then do it with such a resounding success was really cool to see. But
Spectacular movie. And Jim, thank you for picking it. Thank
no
you for being
problem.
honorable and not coming back at me with some sort of revenge pick.
And do you think that maybe now that we are sort of, you know, wrapping up this lovely honorable gesture that I've made, are you going to reciprocate by giving
I
me?
would like to confirm a rule. Can we choose documentaries?
No, we can't. We can't.
Can I officially appeal that decision?
You can try. You know, it's
send it to the board.
definitely.
I'm sending
Yeah,
it to the board. We'll
send it
get
to
a
the
decision
board.
back next
Send
podcast.
it-
We'll let you know how it goes.
Send it to the thousands of listeners and viewers
'Cause
that we
I
have.
have a banger. But put that in my pocket. Get the decision reversed. Okay, I genuinely struggled Genuinely struggled. I picked maybe 5 different movies over the last 7 days, and I think I finally settled on one. It is, in my opinion, a sci-fi cult classic that gets overlooked in a lot of conversations about great thinking man's sci-fi. It was filmed in Australia, partially, not all of it, and it stars Rufus Sewell, Keith Sullivan.
I almost picked this.
Did you really? Jennifer Connelly?
We're watching Dark City.
We're watching Dark City, bro.
You know what? Okay, we are clearly on the same wavelength. Yeah. I literally yesterday, I was like, man, I wish it was my turn to pick next because I want to pick Dark City, you know? And then literally, you've made me very happy because I now get to watch Dark City just like I would if I'd picked the movie.
Quick hint about quick story about Dark City. I saw this pretty quick to when it came out. I was not old enough to understand this movie. Rewatched it years later. I'm like, that's what this movie was? I don't remember this. But yeah, so next podcast will be Dark City.
I look forward to it greatly. So do you want to tell the millions and bajillions of viewers and listeners where they can locate our glorious product, Ben? Because I think they need to know.
You know I do. I want to let the mob know. The Roman mob know where they can find us. Okay, if you want to watch what we're talking about, you can find us on YouTube at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. You can listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. If you'd like to see kind of what's coming up and you want to follow our Instagram, you can do that at Jim and Ben Adventures on Instagram. I post kind of the movie posters. I try to post kind of like a fun little thing I like to do with the last movie we watched, like, hey, who's your favorite James Bond? You know, what would you disguise yourself as in Total Recall? All that sort of stuff. So, like us, subscribe to us, leave us a comment, and please let us know any movies you'd like us to watch. So thank you very much for listening. Please check out those locations. And thank you for listening, watching, or being a part of Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures.
Love it. Next time, Dark City. Woo!